Hello and welcome to the Tips for Effective Interviews training. In this training, we will be going over preparing for the interview, drafting interview questions, what to do during the interview, ending the interview, employment references, and following up with your candidates. So you have a job that you need to fill and you've advertised for the position. Now what do you do? Well, the first step is reviewing the job descriptions. What do your candidates need to have in order to be considered a qualified candidate for the position? This information should also be in your employment ad. What are the educational skills, computer skills, certifications, and employment history that this person should have? Also, think about that employee who has been so successful in the position that you're recruiting for. What are their traits? Carefully screen your candidates. If their skills and experience don't match, don't select them for an interview. Make sure that you're reviewing both their resume and their application entirely. When you're preparing for the interview, you want to be sure to reserve a quiet place to talk so that you won't be interrupted. Also, you want to set aside enough time so that you won't be rushed during the interview. I would probably leave no less than 30 minutes. When you contact the candidate to set up the interview, be sure to tell them the address, where to park, who to ask for, and the phone number information should anything change, and the date and time for the interview and approximately how long the interview will take. Whenever I set out to conduct interviews, I go ahead and have the questions drafted that I want to ask. I ask the same questions in the same order of all of my candidates. I also limit the number of my questions to maybe about 5 to 15 questions. So when you're drafting your questions, be sure to keep in mind your time frame and limit your questions to those that will fit in your allotted time. Be careful when preparing your questions so that they don't allow the candidate to self-assess themselves. For example, how would you describe your interpersonal skills is unlikely to be answered by the candidate as not so good. Instead, say, describe a time when you had a conflict with a coworker, subordinate, or supervisor. How did you react to the situation, and how was the situation resolved? This type of questioning will require the person to give more information on their past behavior. You also want to make sure that your questions are understandable, that you word them so that the candidates will clearly understand what is being asked. Your questions should be to the point and brief and clear, but complex enough to allow adequate demonstration of the ability being rated. They should also be at the level of the candidate and not laced with jargon. Also, they should not be dependent upon other skills or policies that will be learned once the person is in the position. So let's talk about drafting some interview questions. The objective of the interview is to get as much information as you can from your candidates so that you can make a good hiring decision. Asking open-ended questions will help you get more information from your candidates and allow them to reveal more about themselves and their previous work experiences. For example, describe any experience you've had using computer-based word processing programs. You want to look expectantly at the candidate for more information. Wait for more information. You can also ask a vague follow-up question. For example, can you tell me more about that? Also, you want to ask other follow-up questions that relate to the topic. You want to try to avoid close-ended questions, which are those that answer only with a yes or a no. However, if you need to determine if a candidate meets a specific requirement, then close-ended questions could be appropriate. For example, have you completed your 40-hour childcare training? You want to focus on 4 things with your interview questions: job knowledge, background, hypothetical situations, and actual past behavior. With questions about job knowledge, you may ask interviewees to demonstrate a specific job knowledge or provide documentation of a job knowledge. For example, a test, but you don't want to call it a test. Maybe call it a scenario. So a sample question regarding demonstrating job knowledge could be, what steps would you take to address a performance issue with an employee whose productivity is not meeting the minimum monthly standard? Or again, providing that scenario, you have a client who has soiled their clothing while sitting in the recliner in the TV room. What do you do? Your questions regarding background should focus on the work experience, education, and other qualifications of the candidates. For example, a question for background could be, can you describe the process used in your previous job for maintaining a clean kitchen? You may also want to present your interviewee with hypothetical situations that may occur on the job and ask them how they would respond. For example, suppose you were going to miss an important meeting due to unforeseen circumstances, such as an illness or family emergency. What would you do? You will also want to ask questions that require candidates to describe the actual experiences and interactions they've had on past jobs that relate to the job for which they are actually being interviewed for. For example, tell me about a time when you had a major conflict with a coworker. What was the issue? How did you handle it? And what was the result? So now that we've gone through the types of questions you want to ask, you also want to make sure that you avoid asking illegal or prohibited questions, such as questions about age, disability, race, religion, sex, marital status, national origin, citizenship, military status, arrest and convictions. So let's go into some examples of these illegal questions and some examples of questions you can ask instead. So with age, instead of asking, when did you graduate, you can ask the candidate, can you supply transcripts of your education? With disability, instead of asking, do you have a disability, or have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim, you can ask, after reviewing the job description, can you perform the duties listed in the job description with or without reasonable accommodation? What can you ask about race or religion? Nothing. A candidate's race will usually at least be somewhat evident, but race-related discussions or questions or religion-related discussions or questions could imply a bias with that factor. For sex and marital status, instead of asking, are you married? When do you plan to start a family? Do you have children? Ask, are you available to travel frequently? Can you work overtime with no notice? Can you work evenings and weekends? Or when we check references, are there any other names we should look under? National origin or citizenship. Instead of asking, are you a citizen? What country are you from? Where is your accent from? When does your visa expire? What nationality is your last name? You can ask, if you were hired, are you able to provide documentation to prove that you are eligible to work in the United States? Military status, only if they list it on the application. Instead of asking, please provide the status of your military discharge, or will you miss work to perform military service, you can ask, what experience did you gain in the uniformed service that is relevant to the job that you would be doing? We avoid asking any questions regarding arrests. So instead of asking, have you ever been arrested? You can ask instead, Have you ever pled guilty or pled no contest or been convicted of a misdemeanor or felony? There is a question about this on the actual application, so you want to make sure that you refer to that question when you're preparing for your interview and reviewing your applications. You also qualify this question by stating that a conviction will not automatically disqualify a candidate. So now that you've prepared your interview questions, reviewed the resumes and applications, you're ready to start your interviews. Set the candidate at ease with small talk. By getting the candidate to feel comfortable with you, you're more likely to get more information from the candidate. Offer them something to drink. Would you like a cup of coffee? Would you like a glass of water? Monitor your nonverbal communication. For example, don't sit behind the desk during the interview. Arrange the chairs so that you're sitting next to the person rather than in the authoritative position. Also, take good notes. Don't rely on your memory of the interview. Inform the candidate that notes are being taken in order to give full credit for all knowledge, skills, and abilities being demonstrated during the interview. Be sure to listen to the candidate's full response before preparing your next question. Be observant of their body language and their reactions to your questions. Keep the conversation upbeat and positive. Nod often as if in agreement with what they're saying, whether you agree or not. This is going to elicit more response from that individual. Ask for more information. Candidates are often going to arrive with prepared responses that may not be accurate portrayals of their competence. Look at the candidate expectantly and wait for more. Ask vague follow-up questions. Can you tell me more about that? During the interview, you want to make sure you discuss the position, discuss the job description, and also consider showing the candidate the work area and giving them a tour. When ending your interviews, do not make any job commitments to the applicants. Ask the candidate if there is anything else that they would like to tell you about their qualifications. Is there anything else you want us to know about you? Ask the candidates if they have any questions. Do you have any questions for us? Verbally give information about the organization and benefits of the position. Tell them what the rest of the process is. When are your first interviews being completed? Will there be a second interview for selected candidates? When do you expect to make a decision by? Notify the candidate of when to expect further contact from you. We are interviewing some other candidates, and those interviews are scheduled for this week. We will get back to you by Tuesday. We have interviewed 3 candidates for the position, and now it's decision time. Thank the candidate for their time and hand them a business card, and then walk them to the door. You then want to go back to your desk and immediately complete the applicant assessment form while the information is fresh in your head. This form is a rating form that will assist you in evaluating and comparing your applicants. And here is a copy of the applicant assessment form. So now that you've decided on the candidate that you would like to hire, before you make any offer of employment, you must verify the references. Supervisors are required to personally verify the references. This cannot be done by a program assistant or admin assistant or any other employee. This must be done by the hiring supervisor. You are required to verify 2 business references, a minimum of 2 business references. As far as personal references, the group home ADT program down in Southwest Florida is required to not only have the 2 business references, but also they are required to verify 3 personal references for those potential staff members. If you have a candidate that has not worked previously, does not have any previous work history, or may only have 1 previous job that we can do a business reference on, we are able to use personal references for those situations. You must contact HR first, but the requirement is that you would have 2 personal references verified for each 1 business reference that would have been required. The majority of employees in Eastern Seals, Florida are in positions of trust. And what I mean by positions of trust are those people who work with children, who work with the elderly, or work with disabled adults. Employers are required to supply information to hiring employers regarding those people who are in a position of trust. Easter Seals Florida, when checking references, must obtain that information if the person is coming from a position of trust and going into a position of trust. If you have any difficulty obtaining the information, please contact the Human Resources Department and we will help you out with these. I also want to show you the statute that refers back to this. This is a Florida statute, Section 435.10. Every employer of employees covered by this chapter shall furnish copies of personnel records for employees or former employees to any other employer requesting the information. Information contained in the records may include, but is not limited to, disciplinary matters and any reason for termination. Any employer releasing such records shall be considered to be acting in good faith and may not be held liable for information contained in the records, absent showing that the employer falsified such records. And here's a copy of our business reference verification form. The information at the top here, what you would do is take a look at the applicant's application and fill this information in. And then when you contact that employer, you'll complete this information below. And here is a copy of the personal reference form for the group home adult day training applicants. You want to always get back to the people that you interviewed. For any candidates that I take the time to interview, I call them personally to let them know the decision and whether they were selected or not. Sometimes these calls can be awkward and difficult, and sometimes the candidates may ask why they were not selected. I had a candidate even ask me if there were areas that she could improve upon. In the situation with that candidate, she had great skills and experience, but I did find another candidate who had more. You can tell a candidate that although their skills and experience were impressive, you selected a candidate who better fit the organization's need at the time. These are never easy conversations, but I'm sure we all know from personal experience the pains of waiting to hear about a job. Your candidates just want to know either way so that they can move on. Also, failure to contact these candidates back also reflects poorly on your professional image and the professional image of Easter Seals Florida. Just to recap, we've discussed in this training today preparing for the interview, reviewing the job description, resume, application, leaving enough time for the interview and holding it at a quiet place to avoid interruptions, giving the candidate information on the location, who to ask for, and directions, drafting your interview questions, making sure that they're same for every candidate, limited in number, and that they are clear. That they focus on the job knowledge, background, hypothetical situations, and past behavior. That they're open-ended so that you can gather more information. And that you're not asking illegal interview questions. During the interview, you're setting the candidate at ease, making small talk, offering them a beverage, and not sitting behind the desk and monitoring your nonverbal communication. You're also listening and taking good notes. When ending the interview, you're not making any commitments to the applicant. You're also asking any additional follow-up questions that you need and asking the candidate if they have any questions. You're also giving them the rest of the process and notifying them of when they can expect further contact from you. With the references, the supervisor, yourself, must personally verify these. You also need to ensure that you're verifying the appropriate number of references and keeping in mind the information regarding positions of trust. And following up with those candidates that you've interviewed. You always need to follow up with those candidates. To review the forms that we've discussed during this training, the Easter Seals Florida reference forms and the applicant assessment form, please go to the corporate library, human resource information, new hire information, application information, application info, and you will find all of these documents. You can also find more information regarding interview questions to avoid and some alternatives, and some sample interview questions by going to the Corporate Library, Training, Supervisor Training Modules, and Interviewing folder. If you have any questions regarding any of the material in this training, please don't hesitate to contact the Human Resources Department. In order to receive credit for this training, please note the code HR-001 on your training checklist. Thank you.